Honey, you said your mom drove to the drugstore in the middle of the night? The police just called. Our apartment alarm went off, and they said someone tried to take our jewelry while we were at the cabin. I said it with my phone still pressed to my ear, standing barefoot on the cold pine floor of the cabin kitchen, watching my husband's face change like someone had pulled a curtain down behind his eyes. Evan flinched. Not looked surprised. Not asked what? He flinched like I had slapped him. His coffee mug hit the counter hard enough to spill over his knuckles, and before I could say another word, he grabbed his coat from the chair and ran out into the wet, black November night. Then the police called me a second time. That second call is the reason I stopped believing in coincidences. It is the reason I learned the difference between a messy family and a criminal one. And that is the reason I can now spot a forged signature faster than most people can spot a typo in a text message. But before the alarm, before the jewelry, before Evan's mother supposedly drove to a drugstore that wasn't even open, there was a life I honestly thought was safe. Not glamorous, not Instagram pretty. Safe. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a work settlement on the northern edge of Alaska. The kind of place people in the lower 48 imagine as endless snow and men with beards. But in November it was mostly mud, sleet, diesel fumes and darkness that settled on your shoulders by 3 in the afternoon. The settlement was built around a private logistics yard that serviced oil, mining and winter road crews. Rows of employee apartments, a clinic, a cafeteria that served overcooked eggs at all hours, a tiny grocery with prices that made you whisper, "For what?" At a bag of grapes. And one blinking stoplight that everyone ignored because there was almost never anyone else on the road. I was 41, and I worked as an accountant for Northline Industrial Services. Payroll, vendor invoices, equipment leases, tax packets, reimbursement forms from men who thought a photo of a crumpled gas receipt counted as documentation. I liked numbers, because numbers did not smile at you and lie. Numbers either balanced or they didn't. That was how I understood the world. Evan used to tease me about that. "You don't relax," he'd say, leaning in the doorway of our little kitchen while I sat at the table with my laptop open, and our budgie, Pickle, chirping from his cage beside the window. "You reconcile." "Somebody has to," I'd say. He would grin and kiss the top of my head. My fierce little spreadsheet. I hated that nickname and loved it anyway. We had been married exactly 4 years that November. We got married at the courthouse in Anchorage on a windy Tuesday. Not because we were broke, though we were not rolling in money, but because neither of us wanted a production. I had been divorced once already. Evan had never married, and he said he didn't need white chairs, mason jars, or a cousin with a camera pretending to be a photographer. "I need you," he said then, standing outside the courthouse with snow pellets stuck in his dark hair. That's the whole wedding. That sentence carried me through a lot. Evan was 38 when everything started. He worked maintenance for the housing units, which meant he knew every boiler that rattled, every log that stuck, every motion light that flickered during storms. He was good with his hands, quiet with strangers, and soft with animals. Pickle adored him. That bird would ignore me all day, then lose his tiny feathered mind the second Evan walked in, bobbing and squawking like Elvis had entered the room. "Traitor," I'd tell Pickle. Evan would hold out a finger through the cage bars. He respects skill. Skill? You bribed him with millet. That's called leadership. Our apartment was nothing fancy. Beige walls, laminate floors, baseboard heat that clanged like an old ship, and windows that sweated in winter no matter how often I wiped them down. But I made it ours. I bought second-hand curtains from a woman leaving camp for Fairbanks. I taped postcards from my sister Marcy in Oregon along the fridge. I kept a blue ceramic bowl by the door where Evan dumped screws, keys, and whatever odd metal thing he found in his pockets after work. In November, the whole place smelled like wet wool, coffee, and the eucalyptus oil I put in the little diffuser when the air felt too dry. Evan's mother, Darlene, lived 3 doors down in the same apartment building, which I thought was convenient at first. She was 63, sharp as a fishhook, and still pretty, in that hard northern way some women have, with silver hair cut at her jaw and lipstick on even when she was taking out trash. She had moved up from Idaho 2 years before, after Evan's father died, saying she wanted to be closer to her only son. "I won't be in your hair," she told me the first week, setting a foil-covered casserole on my counter. "I know young married people need privacy." Then she proceeded to knock on our door almost every night for the next 2 years. Sometimes it was for sugar, sometimes batteries, sometimes because Evan knows how to fix my shower handle better than maintenance, which was rich, considering Evan was maintenance. Sometimes she just wanted to sit at our table and tell me how her neighbors were too loud, too sloppy, too ungrateful, too whatever word she had sharpened that day. I tried. I really did. My own mother had died when I was 30, and part of me wanted that older woman closeness. Coffee, recipes, the kind of casual family that doesn't need a reason to come over. Darlene could be funny when she wanted. She could tell us stories so dry, you didn't realize it was a joke until the last sentence. But she also had a way of making every compliment feel like a receipt she planned to cash later. "You're very organized, Nora," she said once, watching me sort mail into labeled folders. I suppose that's comforting to Evan, after all the chaos he grew up with. Evan froze with his hand in the cereal box. I looked between them. Chaos? Darlene gave a light laugh. "Oh, just family things. Nothing for you to worry about." Evan changed the subject so fast it left skid marks. That was my first hint that there were rooms in his past I had not been invited into. I noticed it, filed it away, then let it sit there, because marriage is partly trust, and partly choosing not to pry at every locked door. We were doing well that fall. Better than well by our standards. I had finally paid off the last of a medical bill from a surgery I had before we married. Evan had gotten a small raise. We had $18,600 in savings, which, in a place where a gallon of milk could cost nearly $10, felt like a miracle. My credit score had crawled back into the high 700s after years of careful payments. We were talking about buying a small condo in Anchorage someday. Not soon, but someday, when the spreadsheets allowed it. Every Friday night, if the weather wasn't too ugly, we walked to the cafeteria for fried halibut and bad coleslaw. We would sit by the fogged-up windows and watch trucks roll past with amber lights blinking in the dark. 4 years, Evan said one Friday in early November, tapping his plastic fork against the tray. "You sick of me yet?" "Completely," I said. "I'm staying for the bird." He put a hand to his chest. "That hurts." "Pickle has better financial habits. He hoards seeds in his water dish." "Still better." He laughed, and for a second I remember thinking that this was what happiness looked like when you were not 25 anymore. Not fireworks, not big declarations. Just a man laughing across from you, under fluorescent lights, while sleet rattled the window, and you knew exactly how much money was in checking. The inheritance came up 3 days later. It was a Monday, and I was at work in the payroll office, which was really a converted trailer behind the admin building. The wind had been slapping ice pellets against the metal siding all morning. I was reviewing overtime approvals when my cell buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Unknown calls were usually extended warranty scams, or someone pretending my social security number had been suspended, which still makes no sense. but something made me answer. "This is Nora." A man cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitaker? Nora Whitaker?" "Yes." "My name is Howard Pell. I'm an attorney in Spokane. I'm calling regarding the estate of Margaret Leland." The name meant nothing to me. "I'm sorry," I said, swiveling my chair away from my monitor. "Who?" "Margaret Leland," he repeated. "Your late aunt." "I don't have an Aunt Margaret." There was a pause long enough that I could hear paper shifting on his end. "She was your father's cousin," he said. "I understand the relation may have been distant, but according to the records we have, you are one of the named beneficiaries in her trust." I actually laughed because it sounded absurd. My father's side of the family was a box of broken branches. He had died when I was 22, and after that, the Lelands mostly became names on old Christmas cards. I knew there were cousins in Washington and Montana, people my dad mentioned the way you mention former neighbors. "I think you may have the wrong Nora," I said. "Date of birth May 14th, 1982? My fingers went still on the edge of the desk. "That's me." "Last four of Social Security ending in 0198? I sat up straighter. "Where did you get that?" "From estate documents provided to our office. Mrs. Leland passed in September. We are in the process of locating beneficiaries. There is a distribution, but we'll need to verify identity before I discuss amounts. I can email you through our secure portal." I remember looking out the trailer window at a line of ravens picking through snow-dark gravel near the dumpster. One hopped sideways, cocked its head, and stared at me like it knew something. "How much?" I asked before I could stop myself. Mr. Pell hesitated. "Preliminary estimate for your share is around $146,000 before any final expenses or tax considerations." For a few seconds, I could not make my mouth work. That amount was not private jet money. But to me, sitting in a payroll trailer in a place where people worked 14-hour shifts for hazard pay, it sounded like oxygen. It sounded like paying cash for a condo down payment. It sounded like no longer waking up at 2 a.m. wondering which bill would turn into a fist around my throat. Mr. Pell kept talking. Something about documents and notarized identification and a packet arriving by email, but I only caught every third word. "When would this happen?" I asked. "If all beneficiaries return paperwork promptly, first distribution could be in 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. By Christmas, I thought. By New Year's at the latest. I did not tell Evan right away. That sounds terrible now, and maybe it was. But I wanted one clean hour where the news belonged only to me. I wanted to sit with the possibility before it became a discussion about what we should do. So I finished work in a daze, locked my filing cabinet twice because I couldn't remember doing it the first time, and walked home through sideways sleet with my hood cinched tight around my face. Darlene was waiting in the hallway outside our apartment. She had a cigarette between two fingers, even though smoking was banned inside the building, and she held it away from the smoke detector like that made her invisible. "There you are," she said. "Evan's fixing my kitchen drawer. Come have coffee." "I need to put my stuff down." Her eyes slid to the folder tucked under my arm. "Big day?" "Payroll." Just that. Like she could taste a lie on the air. Inside, Pickle was shrieking because Evan had left the radio on a classic rock station, and apparently our bird had strong opinions about Lynyrd Skynyrd. Evan came in 10 minutes later, smelling like pipe sealant and cold air. "You look weird," he said, shrugging out of his jacket. "I got a call today." His smile vanished. "Who died?" That should have stuck with me. Most people ask, good or bad? Evan went straight to death. Apparently someone named Margaret Leland, my dad's cousin. She left me money. He stared at me. How much money? About 146,000 before final expenses. For 1 second his face was blank. Then he let out a laugh and grabbed me so hard my boots lifted off the floor. Nora! Holy hell! Nora! I know. He spun me once in our tiny entryway, banged his hip into the blue ceramic bowl, and sent 2 screws skittering across the laminate. "We can leave," he said into my hair. I pulled back. Leave? Not tomorrow, but this place, this camp, the dark, the mold in the window tracks. We could get you that condo you talk about. The knot in my chest loosened. That's what I thought. We don't tell Mom yet, he said quickly. I blinked. I wasn't planning to announce it on the hallway bulletin board. No, I mean it. She'll get ideas. She'll think I should help with her credit cards or her dental thing. What dental thing? He rubbed the back of his neck. Nothing. She's always got something. There it was again, a door closing. But I was too happy to push. The secure portal email came that evening. I uploaded my driver's license, answered questions about my father's full name and old addresses, and scheduled a video call with Mr. Pell for Wednesday. Evan sat beside me through all of it, one hand on my knee, quiet but vibrating with energy. When I clicked submit, he kissed my temple. My fierce little spreadsheet just became an heiress. Don't say that. It sounds like I need a hat. You do need a hat, a rich lady hat. Pickle chirped from his cage. See? Evan said. He agrees. For about 2 weeks, life felt brighter. Not because the money was in my account yet, it wasn't, but because the future had changed shape. I made a spreadsheet called Anchorage Plan, with tabs for down payment, moving costs, emergency fund, and do not touch unless death or boiler explosion. Evan made fun of me, then asked me to add a column for a parking spot. Darlene noticed anyway. Of course she did. One Thursday night, she came over with a bowl of potato soup and sat at our table without being invited. Evan was in the shower, and I was reviewing the trust packet Mr. Pell had overnighted for signature. Darlene's eyes landed on the legal envelope. "Estate attorney?" she asked. My stomach tightened. "Something from my side of the family." "Well, good for you." She smiled, but only with her mouth. "I always said you had that careful kind of luck." I don't know what that means. It means some women fall into money and still act like they earned every penny. I looked up slowly. She stirred her soup, though she hadn't taken a bite. "Don't get offended, Nora. It was a compliment." "No, it wasn't." Her eyes sharpened. "Evan tells me you two are thinking of Anchorage." "He told you that?" "He tells his mother things." The shower turned off down the hall. Water ticked in the pipes. "Then he can tell you the rest," I said, stacking the papers and sliding them into the envelope. Darlene leaned back. "Just remember, sweetheart, money has a way of showing what people really are." She left before Evan came out. When I told him what she'd said, he swore under his breath. "I told you not to mention it," I said. "I didn't mention the inheritance. I just said someday we might move." "Why?" He looked exhausted all at once. "Because she was asking why I've been looking at Anchorage listings on my phone." "Why was she looking at your phone?" "She wasn't looking. She saw over my shoulder." "Evan? What do you want from me? She's lonely." That became the shape of the next few weeks. Darlene pushed, Evan defended. I retreated into paperwork. because paperwork made sense. Then, on the first Friday of December, Mr. Pell called again. "We've received your signed packet," he said. "Everything appears in order. Distribution may be sooner than expected." "How soon?" "Possibly the week before Christmas." I cried after I hung up. Quietly, in the bathroom at work, with one hand over my mouth because the payroll office walls were thin and the HR assistant, Tessa McLean, had ears like a fox. Tessa found me anyway. She was in her 50s, with blonde grey bangs, turquoise reading glasses, and the calm of a woman who had seen every kind of bad decision a workplace could produce. She knocked once and opened the door a crack. "You pregnant, arrested, or quitting?" I laughed through tears. "None." "Good. Those are the ones with forms." I told her the short version, not the Darlene version, just the inheritance. Tessa whistled softly. "Put a freeze on your credit." "What?" "Credit freeze. All 3 bureaus, today." I wiped my face with toilet paper. "Why?" "Because when money shows up, vultures don't always come from outside the house." The sentence made my skin go cold. "Tessa, it's not like that." She gave me a look over her glasses. "Everybody says that before it is." I did freeze my credit that afternoon, mostly to prove to myself I was sensible, not suspicious. Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. I wrote the PINs in my password manager and felt faintly ridiculous. That little ridiculous act was the first thing that saved me. The second was the alarm. Our apartment had one because Northline required them in employee housing after a series of tool thefts the previous winter. Nothing fancy. Door sensors, window sensors, a motion detector in the living room, and a keypad by the door. Evan installed half of them in the building, including ours. We both had codes. Darlene did not, at least not officially. On December 12th, Evan suggested we take a weekend at a cabin about 40 minutes south, one Northline rented out to employees when it wasn't being used by supervisors. "You need a break," he said. "You've been chewing numbers like they insulted your mother." "I have year-end reports." "You have Saturday night. One night. No spreadsheets." It sounded sweet. It sounded like my husband seeing me. We left after work Saturday in Evan's truck, with Pickle set up at home with extra seed and water, because one night was fine and the building was warm. Darlene stood in her doorway as we loaded our bags. "Roads are slick," she said. "We'll be careful," Evan replied. Her gaze flicked to me. "Don't forget to set the alarm." "I never do," I said. She smiled. "No, you wouldn't." The cabin was small and drafty, with knotty pine walls, a propane stove, and a porch that looked out over black spruce. No cell service unless you stood near the kitchen window and held your phone like an offering. Evan made canned chili. I burned the garlic bread. We played gin rummy at the little table while wind slapped wet snow against the glass. For a few hours, I let myself believe we were okay. At 11:38 p.m., Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, face down, then turned it over. "Mom," he said. "She says she's driving to the drugstore." I looked at him over my cards. "In the middle of the night?" "She has heartburn." "There is no 24-hour drugstore up here." "She probably means the clinic vending machine." "That's not a drugstore." He typed something quickly and put the phone in his pocket. I remember the exact uneasy feeling I had then. Not fear, more like hearing one wrong note in a song you know by heart. At 12:07 a.m., my phone rang from the kitchen windowsill. The caller ID said North Slope Borough Dispatch, because calls routed strangely through the region depending on towers. I answered with my heart already racing. The dispatcher was calm, female, professional. Is this Nora Whitaker? Yes. We received an alarm activation from your residence at Northline Housing, Building C. Officers are on scene. Are you home? No. My husband and I are at the employee cabin. Do you know anyone who would be entering your apartment tonight? I turned and looked at Evan. He was standing beside the stove with his mug in his hand. No, I said. No one should be there. There are signs of attempted removal of property from the bedroom. Officers interrupted the individual before they could leave. I need you to remain available by phone. My mouth went dry. Individual? Who? I can't confirm identity yet, ma'am. Evan's face had gone grey. I lowered the phone a fraction. That was when I said it.
Honey, you said your mom drove to the drugstore in the middle of the night?
The police just called. Our apartment alarm went off, and they said someone tried to take our jewelry while we were at the cabin. He flinched. Then he ran. Not toward me, not toward the phone, not even toward the bedroom where our coats were piled on a chair. He shoved his feet into his boots without tying them, grabbed his keys off the counter, and yanked the cabin door open so hard the wind blew sleet across the kitchen floor. "Evan!" I shouted. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer. The truck engine turned over outside, headlights slicing through the wet dark. And by the time I got to the porch, he was already backing down the rutted drive too fast, his taillights bouncing red between the spruce trees. I stood there in my socks, the dispatcher still saying, "Ma'am? Mrs. Whitaker? Are you safe?" That was when the second call came in, cutting across the first like a blade. Same dispatch number. I fumbled with the screen, my hands so cold and slick, I almost dropped the phone. "Mrs. Whitaker?" a man said this time. "This is Officer Caleb Rourke. We need you to stay where you are. Do not return to the apartment yet." "My husband just left," I said. "He's driving back there." There was a pause. "Your husband is Evan Whitaker?" "Yes." "Ma'am, your husband is not going back to help you." My entire body went still. What does that mean? Officer Rourke exhaled once, controlled and quiet. "We have Darlene Whitaker detained inside your apartment. She had a duffel bag containing jewelry, documents, and a small, fireproof box. She is stating that Evan gave her permission to enter and remove those items." The room tilted. "No," I whispered. "And Mrs. Whitaker," he continued, "she had your alarm code." I remember looking at the cabin table. Our cards were still there, my queen of clubs face up beside Evan's half-finished coffee. The propane stove clicked softly. Somewhere in that horrible stillness, a part of me noticed the burned garlic bread smell still hanging in the air. "She doesn't have our code," I said, but my voice sounded far away. "She entered it correctly on the second attempt," he said. "The alarm company logs show the first attempt failed. Second, disarmed the door chime, but triggered motion because the code was entered under a user profile that had been deleted from the system this evening." "I didn't delete any user profile." "I understand. We'll sort that out. But I need to ask you something. Did you authorize a loan application tonight?" My teeth started chattering, and it was not from the cold. "What loan application?" "A finance company contacted dispatch after our officers found printed forms in your apartment. The forms list your name, your social security number, your expected inheritance, and a requested bridge loan of $85,000. I gripped the counter. The numbers came at me like punches. 85,000, my social security number, my inheritance. My credit is frozen, I said. Yes, ma'am, Officer Rourke said. That appears to be why the application did not go through. Tessa's voice flashed in my head. Vultures don't always come from outside the house. I sank onto the kitchen chair. Where's Evan going? I asked. We don't know yet, he said. But we have reason to believe he was alerted by his mother before officers detained her. Did he receive a text from her around 11:38? My throat closed. She said she was going to the drugstore. Officer Rourke was quiet for 1 second too long. Mrs. Whitaker, there is no open drugstore within driving distance at this hour. I know. Stay at the cabin, lock the door. An officer is on the way to you. I hung up and locked the door with shaking hands. Then I did the accountant thing. The ridiculous, useful, life-saving accountant thing. I documented. I took screenshots of Evan's text thread, where his mother's message preview still showed on his lock screen from earlier, because his iPad was on the cabin couch, synced to his phone. Darlene. Heartburn bad. Driving to drugstore. Don't let Nora panic if alarm glitches. Don't let Nora panic. I photographed the cards on the table, the time on the microwave, the wet boot prints Evan had left in his rush. I wrote down the exact times. 11:38 text, 12:07 first call, 12:11 second call, 12:13 Evan leaving. My handwriting looked like it belonged to an old woman. At 12:42 a.m., a Northline security truck pulled up with an Alaska State Trooper behind it, blue lights turning the cabin windows electric. Trooper Lina Arvizo stepped inside, bringing cold air and authority with her. She was maybe my age, with a black braid tucked into her collar and eyes that missed nothing. "Nora?" she asked. I nodded. "Are there any weapons in the cabin?" "No." "Did your husband threaten you before leaving?" "No, he just ran." She looked at the wet boot prints. That tells me plenty. By 2 a.m. they found Evan. Not at our apartment, not at Darlene's, not on the road between the cabin and the settlement. He was at the private airstrip office, trying to talk a night freight pilot into taking him south on a cargo hop to Fairbanks. He had $6,000 in cash in his jacket, my passport, our marriage certificate, and the original trust packet from Mr. Pell's office. Later, when Trooper Arvizo told me that, I threw up in the cabin bathroom until there was nothing left in me but bile and humiliation. The next morning, they drove me back to Northline housing. Our hallway smelled like wet boots, cigarette smoke, and cheap pine cleaner. 2 neighbors stood in their doorways pretending not to stare. Darlene's door had a strip of yellow evidence tape across it. Mine did too. Pickle was fine. That was the first thing I asked, and I am not ashamed of it. Officer Rourke said one of the officers had checked his cage and refilled his water. Inside, my apartment looked both normal and violated. The couch cushions were still straight. My blue ceramic bowl still sat by the door. But the bedroom drawers were open. My jewelry box was on the bed. And the closet shelf where I kept the fireproof box was empty, except for a clean rectangle in the dust. Officer Rourke, who was younger than he sounded on the phone, walked me through what they had found. Darlene had my grandmother's thin gold bracelet, my first wedding ring from my previous marriage that I kept only because I had paid for it myself, Evan's watch, and a pair of small diamond studs I wore maybe twice a year. But the jewelry was not the real prize. The duffel also had my birth certificate, social security card, old tax returns, bank statements, and the notarized-looking document authorizing Evan Whitaker to act as my financial representative regarding the Margaret Leland Trust. I stared at the paper through a clear evidence sleeve. That is not my signature. Officer Rourke nodded. We didn't think so. The signature slanted too far left. The N in Nora had a little loop I never used, and whoever signed it had written my middle initial like a printed K, not the sharp little slash I had used since high school. That was when my grief changed temperature. It stopped being hot and messy. It went cold. Who notarized it? I asked. Officer Rourke pointed to the stamp. Linda May Sorensen, Notary Public, State of Alaska. I knew that name. Linda ran the mail counter inside a tiny grocery. She notarized vehicle titles, travel forms, and once, memorably, a custody affidavit right between the beef jerky rack and the lottery machine. I want to call my estate attorney, I said. Good, Officer Rourke said. And a divorce attorney. I did both before noon. Howard Pell answered on the second ring and went silent when I explained. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, voice suddenly stripped of all warmth. I am placing an immediate hold on your distribution pending identity confirmation. That protects you, not them. No funds will move without direct verification from you. Thank you. And send me the case number. If a forged power of attorney or assignment document has been used or attempted, my office will cooperate fully with law enforcement. My divorce attorney was a woman in Anchorage named Priya Nandakumar, recommended by Tessa, who apparently had a contact for every disaster known to adult life. Priya's assistant squeezed me into a video consult that afternoon. Priya had short hair, red lipstick, and the energy of someone who enjoyed making liars regret calendar dates. Do you have joint accounts? She asked. Checking and savings. The savings has $18,600, or it did last week. Log in while I'm on the call. I did. The balance was $2,104.17. For a second, all the sound went out of the room. Priya leaned toward her camera. Nora, breathe. He took it. Recent transfers? I clicked. 3 withdrawals over 4 days. $5,000 cash, $6,500 cashier's check. $5,000 electronic transfer to something called Arctic Star Lending. Then smaller debit charges. Gas, airstrip fee, liquor store, ATM. My paycheck goes in there Friday, I whispered. Not anymore, Priya said. Open a new account at a different bank today. Payroll changed today. I'll file for emergency financial restraint, exclusive use of the apartment, and preservation of evidence. Do not speak to him without counsel. I don't want to speak to him at all. Even better. By evening, my life had become a stack of case numbers. Evan was charged with possession of stolen documents, attempted fraud, and later forgery conspiracy when Linda from the grocery admitted Darlene had paid her $200 to stamp a document she had not watched me sign. Darlene cried in court. Evan did not look at me once. That helped. The trust never moved. Howard Pell made me appear by video with my passport, birth certificate, and 3 questions only Margaret would have known to make me laugh through tears. The money went into an account Evan could not touch. Priya got the withdrawals frozen where she could, and traced the cashier's check before it cleared. Arctic Star Lending turned out to be a payday loan outfit where Evan had been feeding a secret debt for months. Not a mistress, not a grand plan, just cowardice with interest. The divorce took 9 months. I kept Pickle, the blue bowl, my grandmother's bracelet, and my name. Evan kept his silence until sentencing, when he said his mother had pressured him and he had been confused. The judge was not confused. Darlene got probation and restitution. Evan got county time, a felony record, and the permanent expression of a man who had mistaken my patience for permission.
1 year later, I left Northline. I bought a small yellow house outside Anchorage, with crooked lilacs by the porch and locks I chose myself. On the first night, I made tea, set Pickle's cage by the window, and opened Margaret's old ledger. On the last page, in her careful hand, she had written, "Nora always did know how to count what mattered." I sat there until the northern sky paled, adding nothing, subtracting no one, finally balanced.